After slapping the male secretary, the officer's wife sent me to military prison. Half a month later, she sent someone to bring me home. The driver told her, the prison guard said the colonel took him away 3 days ago, and he went as a family member. When that slap landed, Richard Foster was standing right behind me, still holding the napkin he had used to wipe the cream off the corner of his mouth. Her first reaction wasn't to ask me why I did it, but to step in front of Henry, coldly. Ordering the guards to restrain me and call the police, I looked at her, smiled, and stopped the recording on my phone. That day was the 8th anniversary celebration of the Foster Group. The banquet hall on the top floor of the hotel was brightly lit, the crystal chandeliers dazzling. I hadn't planned to come. Emily had sent me a message that morning, saying only, "Tonight is the company's anniversary celebration. Show up, and don't dress too shabbily." I stared at those words and didn't reply. 3 years ago, when her startup was at its toughest, she couldn't even pay her employees' salaries. I mortgaged the 2 properties my mother left me and handed over the prototype of the smart warehousing system I had been working on for 4 years. Back then, she grabbed my hand and said, "Kane, once the Foster Group stands on its feet, I'll make sure everyone knows it was you who got me through this." Later, the Foster Group did stand on its feet. Everyone knew she was the female CEO, but no one knew who Kane Miller was. I became the husband by her side who didn't work, didn't socialize, and didn't seek fame. She said, "Your personality is too subdued, you're not suited to be in the spotlight." I believed her until Henry Blake joined the company. He was young, quick to smile, and would call her Sister Emily. He'd post on social media at 2 in the morning. In the photo, he was sitting on the sofa in Emily's office, draped in her coat. The caption read, "Someone's all tough talk, but a softie at heart, afraid I'll catch a cold working late." Below, a crowd of employees chimed in, "Secretary Henry and President Emily are such a perfect match. President Emily finally has someone to take care of her after all these years. Someone in name only should step aside." I took a screenshot and said nothing, because that night, after Emily came back, I asked her about it. She just frowned and said, "It's just the office vibe, don't act like some petty, inexperienced nag." I knew then that explanations were useless. Tonight at the celebration banquet, I heard someone laughing as soon as I walked in. "New secretary, President Emily is way too good to you, cutting your cake with her own hands." Of course, President Emily said Henry is the one she trusts most, even more than the one at home. Henry sat beside Emily, smiling gently. He was wearing a white suit, and pinned to his lapel was the sapphire brooch Emily had asked me to take to the dry cleaner yesterday. My mother's heirloom. I stood at the door, my eyes fixed on the brooch. Emily noticed me too. She froze for a moment, then her face turned cold. "Kane, why are you only showing up now?" I didn't answer. I walked up to Henry. "Take off the brooch." The banquet hall fell silent instantly. Henry raised his hand and touched the brooch, smiling innocently. "Mr. Kane, are you talking about this? Sister Emily gave it to me. She said I'm representing her on stage tonight to give a speech, and my outfit was too plain." Emily frowned. "Kane, it's just a brooch. Today is the company celebration party. Don't make a scene." I looked at her. "Just a brooch," she said impatiently. "There are plenty of things your mother left behind. I'll buy you a new one later." When those words fell, the last thread in my heart snapped, but Henry wasn't satisfied yet. He stood up with his wine glass, deliberately lowering his voice, yet making sure everyone around could hear. "Mr. Kane, don't misunderstand, sister. Emily just thinks that some things are better placed on those who can make good use of them." Someone gasped. I looked at him. "Say that again." Henry smiled and leaned close to my ear. "You're just a loser clinging to relics. If your mother were alive and saw you living off a woman, she'd be ashamed too." The next second, I raised my hand. Slap. The crisp sound echoed throughout the banquet hall. Henry staggered from the slap, his wine glass shattering on the floor, and the surroundings fell into dead silence. Emily almost rushed over. She helped Henry up, looked at me, her eyes as cold as knives. "Kane, you've lost your mind," I said calmly. "He insulted my mother." Henry covered his face, his eyes reddening. "I didn't. I was just advising Mr. Kane not to misunderstand us." He suddenly attacked me. He played his part well, his voice trembling, his eyes full of grievance, and a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Emily didn't even look at me. "Apologize," I said. "Let him take off the brooch first." "I told you to apologize." Her voice rose. Everyone in the banquet hall was staring at me. Someone whispered, "How embarrassing. How did President Emily end up marrying a man like this? Secretary Henry is so dignified. It's really uncivilized of him to hit someone in public like this." I opened my phone and backed up the recording file to the cloud. Seeing my action, Emily grew even angrier. "You still want to threaten people with your phone?" She raised her hand to the Security guards, take his phone. 2 guards stepped forward. I didn't dodge, but just placed my phone face down on the table before they could reach me. Emily, I'm warning you once, tonight, if you ask me to apologize, I won't. If you call the police, I won't stop you either. She sneered. Are you threatening me? Not a threat, it's a notice. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Henry tugged at her sleeve. Sis Emily, forget it, don't let me affect your marriage. The more he tried to persuade her, the darker Emily's expression became. She pulled out her phone and directly dialed the police. Someone has intentionally injured another person here. The location is the top-floor banquet hall of the Hilton Hotel. I stood still without moving. 10 minutes later, the military police arrived. Henry had his injuries examined on the spot, claiming dizziness, facial pain, and tinnitus. Emily personally submitted a list of witnesses at the scene. She said, I'm willing to cooperate with the investigation, handle it as it should be. The military police asked me, do you have anything to say? I looked at Emily, who stood beside Henry without a hint of hesitation. I said, I hit someone, I admit it, but I'll submit evidence for the reason. Emily said coldly, are you still making excuses now? I smiled. Emily, remember, it was you who personally sent me in. Her eyes flickered, but quickly returned to indifference. Kane, adults must take responsibility for their impulses. I nodded. Fine. As I was taken away, I passed by her side. Henry leaned on her shoulder and whispered, Sis Emily, am I making things difficult for you? She patted the back of his hand. It's not your fault. I paused mid-step. She had said those exact words to me 3 years ago. Back then, her funding had fallen through, and she was humiliated by investors. I drank in her place until my stomach bled. She sat by my hospital bed, crying, and said, Kane, it's not your fault, I'm useless. Now, she was offering the same tenderness to someone else. The military vehicle door closed, and I sat in the back, pulling out the backup phone that hadn't been confiscated. Before getting in, I had slipped it into the inner lining of my jacket amid the chaos. I sent 3 messages, the first to my lawyer, initiate divorce proceedings and authorization revocation, the second to Lindsay Walker. Seal all original technical records from 3 years ago and the permission change logs after Henry joined, the third, to a number I hadn't contacted in 10 years, Grandpa, I want to come home. After sending them, I turned off the phone. Outside the window, the hotel lights grew farther and farther away, and I didn't look back. That slap was for Henry, but it was also to wake myself up. On the night I entered military prison, Emily thought I would finally bow my head, but she didn't know that the third message I sent had set the entire Williams family into motion overnight. On the first day in prison, the duty officer handed me paperwork to sign. Kane Miller, 15-day administrative detention. You can apply for a review or contact your family. I picked up the pen. I have no family. The officer glanced at me. Isn't your wife outside? I smiled. She's the one who reported me. The officer was silent for a moment, then pushed the phone toward me. Then call your lawyer. I dialed James Carter's number. When the call connected, I said only one sentence, proceed as planned. Carter paused for 2 seconds on the other end. Mr. Kane, are you sure? I'm sure. What about Emily? I stared at the cold white light on the wall. From today onward, don't leave any room for her. I hung up and signed the papers. 15 days isn't long, but it's enough for a person to let the last bit of warmth in their heart grow cold. The next morning, Emily came. She sat across the visitation glass, looking pale. Henry wasn't there. Behind her stood the company's PR manager, holding a statement. I sat down and picked up the phone. Her first words were, apologize to Henry, and I can get him to issue a letter of understanding. I looked at her. Did he take off the brooch? Emily's gaze turned cold. Kane, are you still hung up on this now? That was my mother's. I said I would accompany. I moved the phone slightly away from my ear. Her voice came through the glass, sharp and unfamiliar. Do you have any idea what a scene you caused last night? At the company celebration, you hit my secretary? Now people online are already talking about how Foster Group just secured the Hongkong project, and you have to embarrass me at a time like this. I pressed the phone back to my ear. So you came for the company, not for me. She let out a cold laugh. You're my husband, you made a mistake, and I'm asking you to take responsibility. Is there a problem? No problem. She stared at me, then apologize. I won't. She suddenly clenched the phone. Kane, don't push me. I smiled. Emily, what else haven't you done? Her face went pale for a moment. For that instant, I thought she might say something, even just a single sentence like, how are you doing in there? But no, she simply held up an agreement against the glass. This is a post-nuptial property agreement. Sign it, and after you get out, move to the villa in the southern part of the city for a while. Don't show up at company events anymore. I'll make sure Henry doesn't pursue this further. I looked at the title of the Agreement, postnuptial property restriction agreement. The content was simple. I admit to voluntarily assaulting a company executive, agree to compensate Henry $500,000 for emotional distress, voluntarily relinquish all rights and interests related to the foster group project, and will not interfere with Emily's work arrangements in the future. I laughed out loud. She frowned. What are you laughing at? You finally stopped pretending. Emily's face darkened completely. Kane, I'm giving you a way out. What you're giving me isn't a way out. It's a noose. I put the phone down. She was still calling my name on the other end, but I didn't listen anymore. On the third day, James Carter came. He slid several documents through the window for me to confirm. Mr. Kane, the first document is the divorce lawsuit preparation materials. The second is the notice of revocation of authorization for the Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 system. The third is the original recommender statement for the Hongkong project. I flipped through them, reading each page very slowly. Carter said, Colonel Williams returned to the country last night and will be in the city today. My fingers paused. How is his health? He's fine. It's just that when he heard you were in here, he was so angry he couldn't sleep all night. I lowered my eyes. Grandfather Colonel Williams, once the highest commander of the military district, still a prominent figure in the local area even after retirement. 15 years ago, when my mother took me away from the Williams family, he scolded her for being immature and called my father penniless. Before my mother passed away, she told me not to hate him. I didn't hate him, I just never went back. Later, when Emily and I got married, she asked me, do you have any relatives left? I said, I have a grandfather. She casually asked, what does he do? I said, he runs some business. She was looking at a financing proposal at the time and didn't even lift her head. That's good, as long as he doesn't cause trouble. So I never brought it up again. Carter lowered his voice. The colonel said, whenever you want to get out, he'll come to see you. I shook my head. No rush. Carter was stunned. You're going to serve the full term. I pushed the cut materials back to him. Let Emily think she's already crushed me. Carter's expression shifted, and he quickly understood. Got it. In the following days, Emily didn't come by again, but Henry posted on Moments, a photo of him sitting in Emily's office, with an exaggerated bandage on his face, captioned, getting hurt isn't scary, what's scary is someone using violence to prove their incompetence. Thanks to everyone who has always believed in me, Sister Emily. Many employees liked it. Someone commented, Secretary Henry, don't be afraid, Emily will always protect you. Another said, finally, someone's locked up, peace and quiet. Lindsay Walker sent the screenshot to Carter, who then printed it out for me to see. After reading it, I only said, save it. On the seventh day, Pengang Group sent a supplementary review letter to Foster Group, on the grounds that there was a dispute over the authorization subject of the project's core system. Emily panicked for the first time. She called the prison requesting a visit, but I refused. On the 10th day, Foster Group's finance department discovered that the original funder of the $50 million bridge loan 3 years ago was neither Foster Group nor Emily, but a personal account named Kane Miller. On the 11th day, Emily's father, Old Foster, came in person. He was more diplomatic than Emily. Kane, it's not a good look for family to be at odds like this. Emily is young and hot-tempered. After you get out, I'll have her apologize to you. I asked him, what about Henry? Old Foster's face stiffened. Just a secretary, not important. If he's not important, then why did your whole family ask me to step aside for him? Old Foster fell silent. I picked up the phone. My voice calm. Mr. Foster, go back and tell Emily, I won't sign the supplementary agreement, nor will I continue the authorization. As for the divorce, I've already filed. Old Foster jerked his head up. What did you say? I put the phone down. He pounded on the glass across from me, but I didn't look back at him. On the evening of the 12th day, Carter came for the second time. He brought a set of clean clothes. The colonel is outside. Aren't there still 3 days left? The injury assessment for Henry came back. It doesn't even constitute minor injury, just an administrative penalty. After the legal team submitted the reconsideration materials, the paperwork was processed early. According to regulations, you can leave now. I didn't move, Carter said. The colonel said he's not here to rescue you, but to pick up a family member and take them home. The words, family member, made my eyes sting. When I changed clothes and walked out, it was drizzling outside. A black military vehicle was parked at the entrance. The door opened, and Colonel Williams sat in the back, his hair much grayer, but his eyes still sharp. He looked at me, his lips moving. You've lost weight. I stood on the steps and called out, Grandpa. The old man's eyes instantly reddened. He reached out his hand. Let's go home. Before I got into the car, I turned back to look at the prison gate. This place had held me for 12 days, and it had also shut the door on my 7-year marriage. 3 days later, Emily finally sent old George, the driver, to pick me up. She didn't come herself. Old George arrived at the registration desk and said with a forced smile, "I'm here on Emily's orders to pick up Mr. Kane." The duty officer flipped through the records, glanced at him, and said, "Kane Miller left 3 days ago." Old George froze. "Left? Who picked him up?" The duty officer replied. "Colonel Williams." The car keys in old George's hand nearly slipped. "Which Colonel Williams? Is there another Colonel Williams in this city?" Old George's face went pale. The duty officer added, "He was registered as a family member, grandfather." When old George relayed this to Emily, she was having her secretary prepare my apology statement. After hearing it, the pen snapped right in her hand. When Emily heard the words, Colonel Williams, the morning meeting was underway in the conference room. Henry sat to her right, the gauze on his face now replaced with a more conspicuous white bandage. Old George stood at the door, his voice trembling. Emily, the prison says Mr. Kane was picked up 3 days ago." Emily looked up. "Who?" Old George swallowed hard. "Colonel Williams, registered as a family member, grandfather." The meeting room was eerily silent. Someone's pen dropped onto the table. Emily stared at old George. "Say that again." Old George didn't dare look at her. "They said Colonel Williams personally received him." Henry let out a laugh first. Old George did. "You mishear. How could someone like the Colonel be Mr. Kane's maternal grandfather?" This remark gave everyone in the room an escape route. Someone immediately chimed in. "Yeah, could it just be a coincidence with the name? When did Kane ever have a colonel for a grandfather? Isn't Mr. Kane from an ordinary family? Didn't Emily always say he had no family left?" Emily's face was cold. She picked up her phone and dialed my number. It couldn't be reached. She then called Carter, who answered. "President Emily." Emily suppressed her anger. "Where is Kane?" Carter's tone was polite. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kane is not available to take your call. Put him on." President Emily. "Mr. Kane has entrusted me to handle the divorce and related authorization matters. You can contact me for anything from now on." Emily stood up abruptly. "James Carter, what do you mean by that?" "Exactly what I said. He's with Colonel Williams right now." Carter paused for a second. "This is Mr. Kane's personal matter." Emily was about to speak again when Henry suddenly covered his face. "Sister Emily, don't worry, Mr. Kane might just know some driver from the Colonel's household and is using the Colonel's name to scare you." Emily glanced at him. She didn't refute it, because she also preferred to believe that answer. She couldn't accept it, couldn't accept that the husband she had neglected for years, the one she saw as lacking ambition, was suddenly connected to Colonel Williams, who was the Colonel, in the local military business circle. The Foster group didn't even qualify to sit at the edge of his table. For the first time, Emily didn't finish the morning meeting. She dismissed everyone, keeping only Henry. "Investigate Kane." Henry was taken aback. "Sister Emily, didn't you check him out before? His father died early. His mother passed away too. No background." Emily stared at him. "Check again." The smile on Henry's face faded slightly. "You don't trust me." Emily rubbed her temples. "It's not that I don't trust you, it's that I don't trust Kane." This remark placated Henry, and he said quietly, "Then I'll go investigate." But he never told Emily that before joining Foster Group, he had already looked into Kane. His background was simple, an ordinary college graduate, his mother Catherine Williams deceased, father unknown, no property, no car, no prominent relatives. That file had been screened by someone he commissioned. Catherine was originally Catherine Williams, a name he deleted from the report, because the first time he saw Williams, he thought of the Colonel's family, but he didn't dare dig deeper. He was afraid Emily would find out, afraid she would know he had lied from the very beginning. In the afternoon, Emily went to the apartment she and I shared after marriage. She hadn't been there in 6 months, but the passcode hadn't changed. She pushed the door open and found it empty. My clothes were gone, the computer from the study was gone, even the black military boots I always wore by the entrance were missing. Standing in the living room, Emily suddenly felt out of place. Before, no matter how late she came back, there was always a light on in the kitchen. I would leave soup for her. If she didn't drink it, I'd pour it out the next day. She found me annoying and said, "Kane, don't live your life like a retired veteran." So I stopped leaving soup. Then she said, "There's no warmth in this home at all. No matter what I did, it was never right." She walked into the study. On the desk was only a cardboard box with a note stuck to it. Emily Foster's personal belongings, sorted. She opened it and found documents, trophies, an old scarf, and a few sticky notes she had carelessly left behind. On top lay a ring, our wedding ring. She reached for it and noticed a notebook underneath. She opened the first page and saw my handwriting. Foster Group's first deal, employee salary shortfall of $780,000, covered. The second page, Emily's stomach condition flared up. The doctor advised less drinking. Tonight, I'll take 3 toasts for her. The third page, Hongkong Logistics, General Manager Zhang doesn't trust Foster Group, schedule another meeting tomorrow. I'll vouch with my personal guarantee. The fourth page, Henry's first day at work, Emily said he reminded her of her younger self. He smiled so easily. I haven't seen him smile like that in a long time. Emily's fingers stopped. She flipped through the pages one by one. There were no complaints, only records, project gaps, client preferences, company crises, the location of her father's blood pressure medication, the size of her mother's birthday gift, the first time Henry took her home late at night, the second time he stayed overnight at the office, the third time he posted a hint on his social media. I remembered the date of every single one. The last page had only one sentence. She's not unaware. She just thinks I won't leave. Emily's breath suddenly faltered. She closed the notebook as if burned. Her phone rang. It was Henry. Sister Emily, I found out, Mr. Kane does seem to have some distant relation to the Colonel's family, but it's very far. The Colonel took him in, probably out of respect for his mother. It doesn't mean the Williams family will stand up for him. Emily gripped the phone tightly. Are you sure? Henry said. Positive, Mr. Kane has no shares in the Colonel's company and no military position. He's just the Colonel's grandson. After hearing this, Emily slowly let out a sigh of relief. As long as he wasn't the Colonel's heir, as long as she hadn't completely misjudged him, there was still a chance to salvage things. She looked at the wedding ring on the table, her voice turning cold. Then let him come back. Tell James Carter I can overlook his lawsuit for divorce, but he must apologize to Henry in person and sign the contract renewal. Henry asked softly, what if he refuses? Emily was silent for a few seconds. Then freeze all his permissions at Foster Group. Without Foster Group, he's nothing. Meanwhile, at the Colonel's old mansion, I sat in the study, opening the Foster Group backend management interface for the last time. The system prompted, are you sure you want to revoke the commercial use authorization for Foster Group's Cloud Warehouse Generation 2? I stared at the screen. 3 years ago, I personally opened this door for Emily. 3 years later, I personally closed it. I pressed confirm. 4 words appeared on the screen. Revocation successful. At 11 p.m. that night, all test servers for the Foster Group's Hongkong project turned red. The technical manager rushed into Emily's office and said only one sentence. Emily, the core system has been locked by the original authorizer. When Emily arrived at the technical department, the entire floor was brightly lit. Programmers gathered around the screens, their faces growing increasingly grim. The test server kept popping up alerts, authorization error, core module unavailable, commercial deployment permission revoked. Emily threw her bag onto the table. Who did this? The technical manager, sweating profusely, replied, it wasn't an internal operation. The backend shows the original authorizer revoked access using a primary key. Who is the original authorizer? The technical manager looked at her, his voice dropping. Kane Miller. Emily froze. Henry, standing nearby, immediately said, impossible. How could Mr. Kane have the primary key? Didn't he only help with the early stage plans? The technical manager gave a bitter smile. Secretary Henry, the earliest architecture documents, algorithm models, and deployment key registrations for Cloud Warehouse Gen 2 were all under Mr. Kane's name. The Foster Group only has commercial usage rights, not ownership. Emily's expression changed. Why didn't you tell me this before? The technical manager dared not meet her eyes. 3 years ago, when the project was initiated, you personally signed the authorization agreement. Mr. Kane was also present at the time. He said that to facilitate financing, the authorizing entity could avoid public disclosure, but the legal documents had to be retained. Emily's lips moved. She remembered that rainy night 3 years ago. She was overwhelmed, and an investor suddenly demanded to see the technology ownership rights. She was so anxious she lost her temper in the office. I placed a document in front of her. Sign this. Tomorrow when they ask, just say Foster Group holds long-term commercial usage rights. She barely glanced at it. If you've handled it, that's fine. I trusted her. I handed her the pen. She signed it, and then rushed off to meet a client. She didn't even see what was written on the first page of the document. Now, that document she had ignored had become a hand gripping her throat. Henry refused to accept it. But the Hongkong project has already signed a letter of intent. His sudden withdrawal of rights constitutes malicious breach of contract. A calm female voice came from the doorway. No. Lindsay Walker walked in holding a folder. She was the legal director of Foster Group and one of the few who had stayed since the early days of the startup. Emily looked at her. You knew too, Lindsay said. I not only knew, I warned you. Article 7 of the Cloud Warehouse Second Generation Authorization Agreement stipulates that once Foster Group infringes on the original rights holder's reputation rights, attribution rights, or profit rights, The rights holder has the right to unilaterally revoke the authorization. Henry's face turned ugly. Mr. Kane is only in detention. What does that have to do with the authorization? Lindsay opened the folder and placed several screenshots on the table. Secretary Henry, these are your posts on your moments and in employee groups. You repeatedly implied that Mr. Kane is incompetent, relies on President Emily for support, and has violent tendencies. Last night, foster groups. Official account even liked a related comment. Everyone in the tech department looked at Henry. Henry's voice tightened. I'm just a victim. What's wrong with venting a little? Lindsay said. You can certainly vent your emotions, but you are the secretary to the president of foster group, and your actions will be interpreted as the company's stance. Emily's face grew paler and paler. She finally realized the problem wasn't Kane throwing a tantrum. It was that she had personally given him a reason to revoke her authority. She picked up her phone to call me, but it still couldn't get through. She turned to Lindsay. Contact James Carter, Lindsay said. Already done. Attorney Carter said Mr. Kane will only accept written communication. What does he want? Lindsay paused. First, the foster group must publicly clarify that Mr. Kane is not unemployed and is not being supported by the foster group. Second, Henry must publicly apologize and return the brooch. Third, the foster group must cease using all derivative modules of Cloud Warehouse Gen 2 and renegotiate the licensing. Fourth, Emily must cooperate with the divorce proceedings. When the last sentence landed, no one in the office dared to speak. Emily's gaze turned icy. He's using the project to force me into a divorce. Lindsay looked at her. Emily, with all due respect, you were the one who used the project and detention to force him to apologize first. The words were soft, but they hit Emily like a slap in the face. Henry immediately stepped forward. Director Lynn, how can you speak up for Mr. Kane? Sister Emily is the company's president. Lindsay glanced at her. I'm speaking up for the contract. Henry was left speechless. Emily forced herself to stay calm. If we stop using Cloud Warehouse Gen 2 and switch to a backup system, how long will it take? The technical manager said. At least 6 months. And the Hongkong project. Hongkong gave us a deployment window of 20 days. Emily closed her eyes. 20 days, 6 months. The gap between them wasn't just time, it was the lifeblood of the foster group. Henry whispered. Sister Emily, Mr. Kane is just trying to scare you. He loves you so much, he won't really let the foster group go under. Emily didn't speak. She had thought the same way before. I won't really leave, I won't really get a divorce, I won't really revoke the authority, I won't really embarrass her. So she kept pushing me back, until she realized that behind her was not a wall, but a cliff. The next morning, foster group received a lawyer's letter from Carter. The content was clear. The authorization had already been revoked, and any further use of the system by foster group would incur liability for infringement. At the same time, the divorce proceedings were officially filed. Emily slammed the lawyer's letter on the table. What exactly does Kane want? Lindsay said. He wants to cut ties. Henry immediately added. He's just retaliating. Emily looked up. Is there a difference? Henry froze. Emily stood up. Get the car ready, we're going to the colonel's house. When old George drove the car to the doorstep, they were stopped by the guard. Emily rolled down the window. I'm Emily Foster. I'm here to see Kane Miller. The guard nodded politely. Mr. Kane said he's not seeing anyone. Emily's face stiffened. She had never been turned away at a door like this, especially when coming to see me. Henry, sitting in the passenger seat, said quietly, Emily, let's go back. This is beneath us. Emily ignored him. She got out of the car, stood in front of the gate, and dialed Carter. Tell Kane I'm at the door, Carter said. Mr. Kane knows. Then why won't he come out? He said that Emily can always send an email for anything that needs to be discussed. Emily gripped the phone, her knuckles turning white. I'm not here to talk business. Carter paused. Mr. Kane said, there's nothing left between you but business. Emily's eyes instantly reddened. She looked up at the tightly shut gate inside the old mansion, on the second-floor study. I stood by the window, watching her. The colonel sat behind me, leaning on his cane. Can't bear to let go. I lowered the curtain. No. Then why are you watching? Just confirming. I really don't feel anything anymore. My grandfather was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly let out a laugh. Just like your mother. I turned around. He slid a document across the table toward me. The Williams family's East District Logistics Center renovation project. I was originally going to give foster group a chance. Now, you decide. I opened the file. The project scale was even larger than Hongkong's. I won't give it directly to foster group. Then who do you want to give it to? Set up a new company, rehire the original team, and open it to public bidding. Foster group can also bid, but they have to wait in line like everyone else. The colonel stared at me for a long time. You're not doing this for revenge. Revenge is too low Class, I pushed the file back. I want to take back the position that was rightfully mine. 3 days later, the Williams family released the bidding announcement for the East District Logistics Center renovation project. The technical lead signature had only 2 words, Kane Miller. On the afternoon the announcement was released, Foster Group exploded. No one dared to speak openly in the employee group, but screenshots were everywhere. Isn't the technical lead for the new project Kane Miller? Is that the same Kane Miller from Emily's family? Wasn't he said to be unemployed? If someone unemployed can be in charge of a Williams family project, then what am I? A failed prenatal education. Henry quickly had the administration issue a notice, strictly prohibited from discussing non-company matters, but the more they forbade discussion, the more uneasy everyone became. Because the Hengong project was still stalled, and the Williams family's new project had publicly put my name out. This was equivalent to telling everyone, Kane Miller wasn't useless. Foster Group had just been keeping him in the shadows all along. Emily stared at the notice for a long time. Henry stood beside her, his face pale. Sister Emily, this must be the Colonel trying to save face for him. How could Kane be capable of handling such a big project? Emily said nothing. She suddenly recalled the early days of starting the business, when the tech team had failed to fix a system crash for 3 consecutive days, and she was so anxious she cursed in the office. I walked in with a cup of coffee, took just 10 minutes to look at the code, and found the problem. She asked me then, "How do you know so much?" I smiled and said, "I've done a bit before." She thought it was just modesty. Looking back now, when I said a bit, it probably wasn't just a bit. Henry grew anxious when she didn't respond. He whispered, "Sister Emily, we can't let him lead us around. Hengong is already pushing us. If we don't handle this, the board will blame you." Emily looked up. "Do you have a plan?" Henry immediately replied, "Yes, we can countersue him for maliciously revoking authority and ask the court for a temporary injunction. Then we can leak the news about him beating someone and going to jail, so public opinion will be on our side." Emily frowned. "Keep escalating. It's not escalation, it's self-defense." Henry's eyes reddened again. "Sister Emily, he beat me like that, and you've been protecting him all along. People outside are already saying I deserve it." Emily looked at his face. The band-aid was still there. The doctor had clearly said it was just a superficial wound, but he had kept it on for half a month. She used to think it was a sign of grievance, but now it suddenly seemed glaring. Yet quickly, she suppressed that doubt. Henry had saved her 3 years ago. In that car accident, Henry had dragged her out of the car and taken her to the hospital. She owed him her life, so she couldn't doubt him now. She said, "Prepare the materials." Henry breathed a sigh of relief. That evening, an anonymous exposé appeared online. Its headline was jarring. Female CEO's husband brutally beats young secretary at banquet, gets detained and then uses colonel relative to freeload off the company. The article was half true, half false, claiming that I was Emily's husband of 7 years, long unemployed, hot-tempered, and had assaulted the male secretary out of jealousy over his career success at the company's celebration banquet. It also said that after my release, I used the colonel's connections to extort the Foster Group, causing major projects to stall. The comments below quickly exploded. Gold digger finally snapped. Beating someone and still acting righteous. That female CEO is so pitiful, earning money to support the family while being dragged down by her husband. Henry sent the article to Emily. "Sister Emily, public opinion is already stirring. As soon as we release the injury photos, Kane won't be able to hold on." Emily looked at the comments, but felt none of the satisfaction she had expected. She asked, "Who wrote the article?" Henry paused. "The PR team found someone." "Did I approve it?" Henry's face turned pale. "I just wanted to help the company." Emily stared at him, wanting to lose her temper, but Henry lowered his head, his voice choked. "I know you care about Mr. Kane, but I got beaten, and I have to watch him step on me and the company to climb up." Emily's anger was stifled. Again, she waved her hand wearily. "Don't let it happen again." Henry lowered his eyes, a hint of triumph flickering in them. At the same time, at the colonel's old mansion, Carter placed the printed exposé in front of me. "Mr. Kane, should we issue a statement immediately?" I read it through. "Not yet." Carter frowned. "Let them steer the narrative." I put the paper down. "Henry is in such a hurry to blow this up because he's afraid no one will see his act." "What do you mean?" I opened my computer and pulled up a folder. Inside were backup videos from the celebration banquet that day. The angle wasn't from the banquet hall surveillance cameras, it was from the micro-recording device hidden in the tie clip on my chest. I knew Henry would provoke me before I went that day. I just didn't expect Emily to go so far. In the video, Henry leaned in close, cursing my mother in a voice only a few nearby could hear, but the tie clip mic captured it clearly. After watching Carter's Expression turned cold. This is enough to turn things around. I shook my head. Not yet. I opened a second folder. Inside were Henry's hotel records, expense reports, vehicle tracking logs, and overtime requests since he joined the company. He had repeatedly booked twin rooms at hotels under the pretext of accompanying Emily to meet clients, but the actual client itineraries didn't exist. Sometimes Emily was indeed at the hotel, but more often, Henry checked in alone, then he posted ambiguous social media updates. He packaged vague information as flirtation, making everyone misunderstand his relationship with Emily. He didn't want Emily, he wanted to use her to climb the ladder. Carter asked, "Where did all this come from?" I said, "I didn't check before because I still wanted to believe her." Later, when I stopped believing, I found out, it was too easy. The third folder was about financial irregularities. Henry was responsible for the external liaison expenses of the President's office, which had been inflated by $376 million over a year, half of which went to a consulting firm under his cousin's name. Carter took a deep breath. "That's enough to put him away," I said. "There's one last piece missing." "What?" "Emily has to see it with her own eyes." Carter understood. She might not believe me, but she couldn't keep lying to herself forever. The next day, Foster Group held an interim board meeting. Henry submitted a counterclaim, accusing me of maliciously revoking authority and demanding $200 million in damages. Emily sat at the head of the table, her face cold and hard. Lindsay flipped through the proposal and closed it immediately. "I disagree." Henry immediately shot back. "Director Lin, are you speaking up for Kane again?" Lindsay replied coldly, "I'm stopping the company from committing suicide." Henry slammed the table. Kane has already gotten on top of Foster Group. Suddenly, the conference room door swung open. Carter walked in with two assistants. Emily shot to her feet. "Who let you in?" Carter placed a file on the table. "President Emily, Mr. Kane asked me to deliver the first batch of evidence." Henry's face changed instantly. "What evidence?" Carter looked at him. "Proof that you're not the victim, but the instigator." The big screen lit up. The celebration party video played. Henry's words, "If your mother were alive, she'd be ashamed of you too," came through loud and clear. The entire conference room fell into dead silence, Emily's face turning pale inch by inch. Before the video finished, Carter opened a second folder, titled Henry's Abnormal Reimbursements and Fake Hotel Itinerary Details. On the big screen, Henry's voice continued to replay, "You're just a loser guarding relics. If your mother were alive and saw you living off a woman, she'd be ashamed of you too." Every word was like a nail. Emily stood at the head of the table, her hand resting on the edge. She wasn't looking at me, because I wasn't there in person. She could only see the screen. On the screen, I stood upright, Henry leaning close to my ear, grinning provocatively. Then I raised my hand, and the slap landed. Before, everyone only saw that slap. Now, they finally heard the words that came before it. Old Foster's face turned ashen, and several board members exchanged glances, none of them speaking. Lindsay set down her pen, her voice calm but firm. "It can now be confirmed that Mr. Kane's actions had a cause. Some of the information previously released by the company was materially inaccurate." Henry's face went pale. "This is edited, Sister Emily, this is edited," Carter said calmly. "The original video has been submitted to the notary office. If Secretary Henry believes it's edited, he can apply for a judicial appraisal." Henry's lips trembled. He looked at Emily. "Sister Emily, you have to believe me, I was just too scared at the time. I might have said something in anger. But he still shouldn't have hit me." Emily finally looked at him. Her gaze was complicated. Disappointment, anger, doubt, and a hint of embarrassment she herself dared not admit. "Why did you insult his mother?" Henry's eyes instantly reddened. "I didn't mean to insult Auntie. I just lost control because he kept targeting me. I know I was wrong." He stood up and bowed deeply to Emily. "If I've affected the company, I can resign." It was a clever move. He didn't apologize to me, only showed weakness to Emily. Sure enough, Emily's expression wavered for a moment. Carter didn't give her time to hesitate. He opened the second folder. "These are the detailed records of Secretary Henry's external liaison expenses over the past year and a half. A total of 482 million yuan was reimbursed, of which 376 million went to a shell consulting company with familial ties to Secretary Henry." Henry jerked his head up. "You're lying." Carter projected the business registration information onto the screen. "Legal representative, Su Jianping, relationship note, Henry's cousin." The sound of sharp intakes of breath filled the meeting room. Carter continued, "That's just the first part. The second part is that Henry's secretary used Emily's full itinerary access to falsify client visit records, creating the illusion of checking into hotels alone with Emily, and repeatedly posted suggestive content on social media." The screen switched, displaying screenshots of social media posts. "Staying up late with someone important. Someone says I'm a hassle, but still left a room key for me. She says I deserve better. Under each post, employees' teasing comments were preserved. The next page showed hotel check-in records, room booked by Henry, companion, none, reimbursement reason, accompanying Emily and Mr. Zhang from Hengong. But Mr. Zhang from Hengong was out of town that day. Emily stared at those screenshots, the color draining from her face bit by bit. She wasn't stupid. She just hadn't wanted to suspect before. Now, with the evidence laid before her, she finally understood. Many of those ambiguous situations weren't misunderstandings at all. Henry had deliberately spread the smoke. He made the entire company believe he had a special relationship with Emily, then played innocent, step by step pushing me into the role of a jealous, irritable, out-of-control husband. Emily's voice was low. Henry, explain yourself. Henry took a step back. Those posts were just jokes. The hotel records were an administrative mistake. I can reimburse the money, but I had no ill intent. Lindsay said coldly, $376 million is no longer just a matter of reimbursement. Henry's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Emily, his eyes no longer filled with grievance but resentment. Sister Emily, are you going to sacrifice me for Cain now? Emily was stunned. Henry sneered. I worked overtime with you, attended social events with you, drank for you, and handled all the troubles you didn't want to face. What about Cain? Besides pretending to be devoted at home, what else can he do? Emily slammed the table. Shut up. Henry grew anxious too. Do you think Cain truly loves you? If he loved you, why would he revoke the authorization? Why would he let the company fall into crisis? He's just waiting to see you bow your head, Carter said calmly. Before Mr. Cain revoked the authorization, President Emily had already made him sign the rights waiver agreement in prison. Henry was left speechless. Old Foster finally spoke. Enough. He stared at Henry. From now on, you are suspended pending an internal investigation. Henry's face turned pale. Mr. Foster. Old Foster didn't even look at him. Security, take him out. 2 security guards entered, and Henry struggled. Sister Emily, you can't do this to me. Don't forget who saved you in the car accident 3 years ago. At these words, Emily's expression changed drastically. She raised her hand. Wait. The security guard stopped. Henry clung to this lifeline. Sister Emily, you remember, 3 years ago, if I hadn't dragged you out of the car, you would have died. Where was Cain? He only played the good guy afterward. Emily closed her eyes. This was the hardest part about letting go of Henry. 3 years ago, on the eve of Foster Group's financing, she had been in a car accident on the highway. When she woke up, Henry was by her bedside, his clothes covered in blood. He said, President Emily, I was the one who brought you here. From that day on, she gave him opportunities and indulgence. She had always felt she owed Henry her life. Carter looked at her and suddenly said, regarding the car accident 3 years ago, Mr. Cain also asked me to bring a document. Emily's eyes snapped open. What document? Carter replied, it's not time yet. He packed up his computer. Mr. Cain said that if President Emily wants to know the truth, come to the Hengong Group termination hearing tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Emily's voice turned hoarse. Will he come? Carter glanced at her. Yes. The next day, at the Hengong Group conference hall, by the time Emily arrived with the Foster Group team, I was already seated at the other end of the long table. This was the first time she had seen me since the incident. I was wearing a dark, military-style suit, my tie neatly tied. 12 days in prison hadn't left me disheveled. Instead, it made her feel that I was trying to strip myself clean from an old relationship. So clean that I seemed unfamiliar to her. She stood at the door and called out softly, Cain. I looked up. President Emily, not wife, but President Emily. Her face went pale. Mr. Zhang, the head of Hengong, glanced at us and got straight to the point. The authorization dispute remains unresolved, posing significant risks to the Hengong project. Today's hearing has only one question. Can the Foster Group continue to undertake the project? Henry didn't show up. He had been suspended. Emily sat down, forcing herself to say, the Foster Group can renegotiate the authorization with Mr. Cain. Mr. Zhang turned to me. Mr. Cain, what's your opinion? I slid a document to the center of the table. I do not agree to renew the contract. Emily looked at me sharply. Cain, during the project execution, the Foster Group allowed management to defame the original rights holder, fabricate public opinion, and pressure me into relinquishing my rights. The foundation for cooperation no longer exists. Mr. Zhang nodded. Then Hengong has no choice but to terminate the partnership with the Foster Group. Emily's face instantly drained of color, and her team behind her panicked. The Hengong project was the Foster Group's biggest order this year. Once terminated, the pressure from stock prices, credit lines, and the board would all come crashing down. She looked at me. Do you have to do this? I closed the document, President Emily, adults must take responsibility for their choices. These were the words she said to me in the banquet hall, and now I was returning them to her. The meeting ended, and Hengong announced the project's termination on the spot. Emily chased me into the hallway. "Kane, let's talk." I stopped. She hurried over to me, her eyes reddening. "I admit I handled Henry's situation wrong, but the foster group was built by both of us. You can't just destroy it like this." I looked at her. "I'm not destroying the foster group." "Then what are you doing?" "Taking back what's mine." She caught her breath. I took a small box from Carter and handed it to her. She opened it. Inside was the sapphire brooch. Henry had returned it, but the pin was bent and the edges of the gem were scratched. I said, "From today onward, neither this thing nor you need to appear in my life anymore." Her hand trembled, and the box fell to the floor. I turned and walked away. She stood there without chasing after me, because her phone rang. Old Foster calling. "Emily, the stock price has hit the limit down." On the night Foster Group's stock price hit the limit down, Henry went missing. Lindsay found out that before resigning, he had copied the quotation draft for the Hengong project. When news of Henry's disappearance came, Emily was sitting in her office until dawn. The desk was piled with documents: the Hengong termination letter, the bank risk warning letter, the board accountability notice, and the second lawyer's letter I had sent. She couldn't bring herself to read a single page. Her mind kept replaying my words. "Take back what's mine," she had always thought. That what was mine meant the marriage, her, this family. Now she finally understood. I had given her too much: funds, technology, connections, trust, patience, so much that she had gotten used to never saying thank you. At 1 a.m., Lindsay knocked and entered. "President Emily, we can't reach Henry. His office computer has been wiped clean." Emily looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "The tech department recovered some records. Before his suspension, Henry copied the Hengong project quotation draft, the client analysis sheet, and the draft of the Williams family's East District project proposal." Emily's face changed. "The Williams family project proposal?" Lindsay nodded. "That draft was originally stored in the president's office shared drive, a template left by Mr. Kane 3 years ago. Henry downloaded it." Emily stood up. "Call the police," Lindsay said. "The materials are already being prepared. But there's one more thing." She pushed the tablet over. On the screen was an anonymous email, the sender hidden, with the subject line: "Foster Group CEO turns a blind eye to husband's violence, falsifies evidence, forces secretary to take the blame." Attached were a few photos, a selfie of Henry with gauze on his face, and a recording. In the recording, Henry sobbed, "I don't want to pursue Mr. Kane. It's Emily who keeps pushing me to suspend him. She's afraid it will affect the colonel's connections." After listening, Emily's fingers went cold. Henry was starting to turn on her. Lindsay said, "This email has already been sent to several media outlets, and it might blow up by tomorrow morning." Emily closed her eyes. She finally realized, Henry was never a wounded puppy, he was a snake. She had taken the snake into her arms with her own hands, fed it, and pushed me into prison. The next morning, the internet exploded again. Henry spoke out as the victimized secretary, claiming he had been beaten by Kane and then abandoned by the foster group to curry favor with the colonel's family. He also hinted that Emily and I had long been colluding for personal gain, and that the so-called revocation of authority was just a joint effort by the couple to force him to take the blame. Public opinion was in complete chaos. The foster group's PR department was overwhelmed, and the board demanded that Emily provide an immediate explanation. Old Foster raged on the phone. "I told you long ago that Henry couldn't stay. You insisted he saved you. Now look, the company has become a laughingstock because of you too." For the first time, Emily didn't argue back. She just asked quietly, "Dad, can the hospital records from the car accident back then still be found?" Old Foster was taken aback. "Why are you asking about that? I want to confirm whether Henry was the one who saved me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Emily, what do you mean by that?" Emily looked out the window. "Kane might have some materials." Old Foster's voice grew heavy. "If it really wasn't Henry back then, do you know what that means?" Of course she knew. It meant she had owed the wrong person, protected the wrong person, and deeply hurt the one who had always stood by her side. Meanwhile, I was in a meeting at the temporary office of the Williams family project. The new team had just been assembled, and among the technical core were a few familiar faces. People who had been sidelined by the foster group back in the day. Someone spotted me and couldn't help but say, "Kane, I never thought I'd get to work on a project with you again." I smiled. "This time, we're not making wedding dresses for others." Halfway through the meeting, Carter walked in. "Henry's making noise again." I took the tablet, read through it, and someone in the team cursed, "This guy has no shame." I handed the tablet back to Carter. "Let him keep talking," Carter said. "He's already dragged Emily into it. The more anxious he gets, the more holes he leaves." Emily's Side wants to look into the car accident from 3 years ago. My pen paused, and the room fell silent. The car accident 3 years ago was the deepest thorn between Emily and me. That day, she went to meet an investor, and her car was rear-ended at the highway exit. When I got the call and rushed over, the scene was chaos. She was trapped in the passenger seat, her face covered in blood. I smashed the window and pulled her out. Before the ambulance arrived, she grabbed my hand, crying out in pain. I shoved my jacket behind her back and pressed down on her bleeding arm. The ambulance came, and I followed her in, but at the hospital entrance, I got a call. My mother was critically ill. I handed Emily over to the ER doctor, left my ID and payment card, and turned to go to another hospital. My mother didn't make it that night. After I dealt with everything and returned to the hospital, Henry was already standing by Emily's bedside, claiming he had saved her. I didn't call him out then, because Emily had just woken up and was weak, because Henry had indeed helped call a nurse after the accident, because I felt that saving her wasn't about seeking her gratitude. Later, when she brought up Henry's life-saving favor, I tried to explain, but she said, "Kane, I know you don't like Henry, but don't turn a life-saving matter into jealousy." At that moment, I shut my mouth. Looking back now, some silences aren't magnanimity, they're handing a knife to a liar. Carter asked softly, "Should we release the car accident evidence now?" I shook my head. "Not yet. What are you waiting for?" I looked out the window. "Wait until Emily finds half of it herself, then let her see the other half." Carter understood. The most painful thing isn't being told the truth, but digging up the lies you buried with your own hands. That afternoon, Emily went to the hospital from back then. In the emergency records room, an old doctor searched for a long time. "Miss Foster, this case is a bit old, but the payment records from that time are still here." Emily immediately asked, "Who brought me in?" The doctor looked at the screen. "The contact person on file, Kane Miller." Emily's fingers clenched suddenly. "It wasn't Henry." The doctor frowned. "Henry, no recollection. When the ambulance arrived, the accompanying person signed as Kane Miller, and he also paid with his card." The color drained from Emily's face. She asked again, "Then when did Kane leave?" The doctor thought for a moment. "The ER was chaotic that day. I remember he got a phone call, and his face turned pale. He begged us to save you, then left his card and went." Emily's voice trembled. "Why did he leave?" The doctor flipped through the notes. "It seems his mother was critically ill." Those 4 words, "mother critically ill," hit Emily like a hammer, and she could barely stand. "That day, my mother passed away, and when she woke up, her first words to Henry were, 'Was it you who saved me?'" Henry said, "Yes." She believed it for 3 years, and owed Henry for 3 years. Then, for the sake of that lie, she sent me to prison. When Emily walked out of the hospital, the sunlight was blinding. She crouched on the steps, crying for the first time like someone who had lost control. Her phone rang. It was an email from Carter. The attachment was titled, "Records of the car accident scene 3 years ago and Kane Miller's personal payment voucher." The email body contained only one sentence. "MS, Emily, Mr. Kane said, he never needed you to repay a favor, only that you not repay kindness with enmity." After reading the email, Emily rushed overnight to the entrance of the Williams family's project department, only to hear me say to the team at the door, "The bidding qualification of the Foster Group is temporarily retained, but Henry is involved in a leak and must undergo a public review." Emily stood at the door, not entering immediately. The lights inside were bright. I sat at the head of the conference table, confirming the bidding rules with the team, my voice calm and clear, like a knife without warmth. "All bidding units will be scored uniformly. The Foster Group can participate, but must submit 3 additional documents. First, the progress of the dispute over the second-generation cloud warehouse infringement. Second, the investigation report on Henry's leak. Third, the Foster Group management statement of responsibility for the loss of control over public opinion in the early stage." Someone whispered, "Isn't this forcing the Foster Group to reopen old wounds?" I looked up. "Wounds won't heal if covered, they'll only fester." Outside the door, Emily's face was deathly pale. Old George stood behind her, barely daring to breathe. She finally pushed the door open. Everyone in the conference room looked over. I put down my pen. "MS, Emily, is there something?" Emily looked at me. This time, she didn't put on the airs of a CEO or give me orders. She said in a low voice, "I found out about the car accident." The conference room fell silent. I closed the file. "So what?" Her eyes reddened. "Why didn't you tell me back then?" I looked at her and found it amusing. "Did I never tell you?" She froze. I continued, "On the 3rd day after you woke up, I told you. I was there that night too. You said, 'Kane, I don't need to make up stories like this to compete for Henry's credit.'" Her face turned pale. She remembered, that day in the hospital room, she had just finished her porridge, and I sat by the bed, my voice very soft. "Emily, actually that night," she cut me off. "Kane, I know you don't like Henry, but he saved me. Don't make things difficult for me. I was silent for a long time then, and finally said, fine, one word, fine, ended all explanations. Emily's lips trembled. I didn't know back then. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. She looked as if she'd been slapped. I didn't raise my voice. Emily, you've always thought you were clear-headed, in the company. You can tell who's useful and who's not, who should stay and who should be sacrificed, but as long as Henry cries a little, you don't bother to check anything. Tears fell from her eyes. Kane, I was wrong. No one spoke in the meeting room. I stood up. I've received your apology, but it doesn't change any outcomes, she said urgently. I'll deal with Henry. I'll make a public clarification, and I'll withdraw all previous accusations against you. That's what you should have done in the first place. I handed her a document. The bid review is in 3 days. If the foster group wants to keep its qualification, you need to submit a statement of responsibility yourself. She looked down at the document. You want me to admit that I misjudged, that I indulged Henry, that I forced you to give up your rights? Yes, in front of the Williams family and all the reviewers. I smiled, a bitter smile. Emily's voice trembled. You want me to judge myself? I looked at her. President Emily, you've gotten used to letting others bear the consequences for you, for far too long. She didn't argue, because it was true. 3 days later, the Williams family bid review meeting, the foster group's representative seats were fully occupied, and old Foster himself had come. His expression was grim, but he did not stop Emily from taking the stage, because he knew the foster group had no choice. On the review panel, I sat in the middle. Colonel Williams did not appear. He had entrusted this matter to me to make it clear to everyone. I was not here because of him. I was the person in charge of this project. When Emily stepped up to the podium, the audience included media, partners, senior members of the Williams family, and directors of the foster group. She opened her file, paused for a few seconds, and then began. Regarding the recent authorization dispute between the foster group and Mr. Kane Miller, I am speaking on behalf of the foster group to provide an explanation. Her voice was a bit hoarse. First, Mr. Kane Miller is not an unemployed person as rumored. He was the provider of the foster group's early core technology architecture and the original rights holder of the cloud warehouse second-generation system. A stir rippled through the audience. She continued. Second, the foster group's management made a serious misjudgment during the celebration event. Henry Blake insulted Mr. Kane Miller and his deceased mother. Mr. Kane Miller's physical response had a clear provocation. Camera flashes went off, and Emily's fingers trembled slightly, but she did not stop. Third, some members of the foster group, without verifying the facts, allowed false rumors to spread, causing harm to Mr. Kane Miller's reputation. As the president, I bear the primary responsibility. She looked up at me. Here, I publicly apologize to Mr. Kane Miller. The entire venue fell silent. She bowed at a 90-degree angle. This was once the scene Henry most wanted to see. He wanted to see me bow, but instead, it was Emily who bowed. I sat on the review panel without moving, and I did not say I forgave her, because forgiveness is not a procedure, and her single bow cannot erase the 12 days I spent in prison. After his speech, Lindsay submitted Henry's leak investigation report. The report showed that Henry had indeed downloaded materials related to the Williams family project and sent them via his personal email to a competing company, Xingtang Technology, whose project consultant was Henry's cousin, Sujian Payne. The Williams family's legal team announced on the spot that they would file a lawsuit against Henry and the related company. The foster group retained its bidding qualification, but its score was deducted to the minimum. Old Foster's face turned extremely grim. After the meeting, Emily caught up with me. Kane, I've done exactly as you said. I nodded. Emily, you've cooperated well. A flicker of pain crossed her eyes. Can you stop calling me that? I looked at her. What else should I call you? She couldn't answer. Wife didn't suit her. And, Emily, I was unwilling to say. She was silent for a moment, then said softly, Henry has already been summoned by the police. I'll hand over all his issues. That's between you and him. What about us? I glanced at her. All that's left between us is divorce. Her tears threatened to fall again. I turned and continued walking. Suddenly, she called out from behind me. Kane, if I had believed you back then, would we not be where we are today? I stopped. After a few seconds, I said, no. She was stunned. I turned back to look at her, because back then, you not believing me wasn't an accident, it was a habit. With that, I left. That evening, Henry was stopped at the airport. He had tried to flee abroad. The police found a portable hard drive in his luggage, which contained not only foster group materials but also private recordings of Emily that he had secretly kept. In one of the recordings, he said to Sujian Payne, Emily is the easiest to fool. As long as I bring up the car accident, she'll give me anything. When this recording reached Emily, she finally broke down, but what I received was another file. Henry had once Forged my signature to transfer an early-stage fund from Foster Group. After Henry was summoned, Foster Group did not quiet down. Instead, it became more chaotic, because the portable hard drive he left behind contained too many things: fake expense reports, fake itineraries, records of leaks, secretly recorded audio, and a forged transfer document. When Carter handed me the file, his expression was grim. "Mr. Kane, this transaction took place 3 years ago, amounting to $20 million. On the surface, it appears you signed off on transferring the money to a consulting agency introduced by Henry as financing advisory fees." I picked it up and looked. The signature was a good imitation, but I spotted the issue at a glance. When I write Kane, the last stroke of the K slightly curves upward. This signature lacked that. "Where did the money end up?" Carter said. "First to the consulting agency, then split into multiple transfers to Henry, Payne, and an overseas account." I smiled. No wonder he was so afraid of me investigating. 3 years ago, after Foster Group's successful financing, there was indeed a shortfall of $20 million in the accounts. At the time, the finance department called it advisory fees, and Emily, busy with expansion, didn't look into it. I mentioned it once, and she said, "The success of the financing is what matters most. The money is spent, so let it go. Don't keep fixating on the details." I remembered that line for 3 years. Now this thread had finally surfaced. I put the file down. "Notify Lindsay. I want to sit in on tomorrow's board meeting." Carter nodded. "In what capacity?" I looked out the window. "As a creditor of Foster Group, a holder of its technology rights, and an early-stage capital contributor." The next day, the atmosphere in Foster Group's boardroom was tense. Emily sat at the head of the table, looking gaunt. Old Foster sat beside her, his face dark. When I walked in, all the directors looked up. A few days ago, they still thought of me as just Emily's husband. Now no one dared to underestimate me. Emily's eyes flickered when she saw me. I sat down. "Let's begin." Old Foster suppressed his anger. "Mr. Kane, what brings you here today?" I said. "3 things." I placed the first document on the table. First, the initial $50 million bridge loan for the Foster Group was funded by me as the original contributor. I request the board to confirm the repayment plan. The directors were in an uproar, and Old Foster's face changed. "Wasn't that money considered joint spousal support back then?" "No." I projected the bank transaction records onto the screen. The transfer occurred before the marriage, marked as of loan, with the recipient being Emily's personal account, later transferred to the Foster Group. Emily stared at the screen, her lips turning pale. She remembered that money. Back then, she was so anxious she couldn't sleep all night, and I handed her the card, saying, "Use it." First, she asked where the money came from, and I said, "From the family." She didn't ask again. Later, when the company took off, she didn't bring it up, not because she forgot, but because she thought there was no need to keep accounts between husband and wife. But she forgot. Whether to keep accounts or not wasn't for her to decide alone. I placed the second document. Second, for all subsequent derivative modules of the Cloud Warehouse Generation 2, the Foster Group must cease using them or re-sign a license at market prices. With the old agreement voided, the technical director immediately became anxious. "Mr. Kane, this will cause multiple projects to come to a halt." I looked at him. "That's the Foster Group's management problem." I pushed the third document in front of Emily. Third, the $20 million consulting fee from 3 years ago, suspected to have been transferred under a forged signature of mine. I request the Foster Group to cooperate with the police investigation. Emily picked up the document, and the moment she saw the signature, her fingers trembled. "This is your signature." "No." I looked up. "Henry forged it. The current evidence points to him and Payne." The meeting room erupted. Old Foster slammed the table. "Ridiculous. How did such a large sum pass financial review?" Lindsay spoke up. "Back then, the approval chain had Emily's electronic authorization." Everyone looked at Emily. Emily's face turned deathly pale. She remembered, that day Henry walked into the office with a tablet. "Sis Emily, the finance department is pushing for this consulting fee to go through the process. Mr. Kane has already reviewed it. You just need to click confirm." She was on a video call with investors at the time and casually pressed confirm. She didn't even open the file, because Henry said, "Kane has reviewed it," and she believed him. Henry also used my name. Old Foster was shaking with anger. "Emily, exactly how many things did you let this secretary meddle in?" Emily didn't answer. I stood up. "I'm done." "What comes next is an internal matter for the Foster Group," Old Foster said urgently. "Kane, we can talk." I looked at him. "Mr. Foster, you should know. I'm not here to talk today. I'm here to inform." Old Foster's mouth twitched. The same words I had spoken in the banquet hall back then, and no one listened. Now, everyone heard them clearly. After the meeting ended, The foster group board of directors immediately initiated an internal accountability process. Emily was temporarily suspended from some decision-making authority. An old foster took over finance and legal affairs temporarily. Henry's assets were frozen, and Su Jianping was taken away by the police. The foster group's stock price plummeted for the second time. Everyone said the foster group had been severely crippled this time, but I knew this wasn't the most painful part. The most painful part was that Emily finally saw clearly. The Henry she had protected had not only deceived her feelings and trust but had also used her hand to drag the entire foster group into the mud. That evening, Emily came to find me. This time, she didn't go to Colonel's house. She waited at the entrance of the Williams family project apartment, holding the notebook I had left in the apartment. When I came downstairs, she was standing in the wind. I stopped. She handed the notebook to me. "You forgot to take this." "I didn't take it. I don't want it anymore." She looked as if she had been stabbed. "Inside are all the things you've done for me over the years. That's why I don't want it." Tears rolled down her face. "I've finished reading it. I didn't know you had recorded so much." I looked at her. "There are many things you don't know." She bit her lip. "Kane, can we start over? Not about the company, not about the divorce, just about us." I was silent for 2 seconds. "Emily, there's nothing to talk about between us." She grew anxious. "But I already know I was wrong. Henry tricked me with the car accident. He cheated me out of money. He deceived me. I'll make it up to you. I'll make him pay." I said, "You hate Henry now because he deceived you, not because you hurt me." She froze. I continued, "If he hadn't cheated you out of money, hadn't harmed foster group, and just kept provoking me in front of you, would you still think you were wrong?" She couldn't speak. The answer was too cruel. She probably wouldn't. She would likely just keep saying, "Kane, don't make a scene." I walked past her. She suddenly grabbed my sleeve. "Then what do you want me to do?" I looked down at her hand, and she slowly let go. I said, "Sign it." "What? The divorce?" The last trace of color drained from her face. "You really don't want me anymore?" I looked at her. "Emily, you were the one who didn't want me first." The next day, the court notified us of the first divorce mediation. At the same time, the police officially filed a case to investigate Henry for suspected embezzlement, infringement of trade secrets, and forgery of signatures. The internal audit report of foster group was also disclosed by the media. Public opinion completely reversed. Those who had previously cursed me began to apologize. Some said, "Turns out the kept man was the real big shot." Others said, "The female CEO was blind, case closed." And still others said, "Kane is ruthless, endured for 3 years, and when he struck, it was all evidence." I look at the comments and turn off my phone. I don't need understanding from strangers. A belated sense of justice can't undo the grievances I've suffered, but it can ensure that no one who owes a price gets away. The night before the divorce mediation, Emily received a letter from Henry, sent from the detention center. There was only one sentence in the letter: "Do you think Kane is innocent?" Back then, the Williams family took him in because his mother left a will. That letter dragged Emily back into the past. The paper was thin, the handwriting hasty. "Sister Emily, I know you hate me now, but Kane isn't as innocent as you think. He had connections with the Colonel's family all along, yet he pretended to be poor to deceive you. His mother, Catherine Williams, left a will back then, which included assets from the Colonel's family. He got close to you just to use the foster group to whitewash himself." After reading it, Emily didn't believe it right away. In the past, she might have come to confront me with the letter. Now she had learned to investigate. She asked Lindsay to verify it. Lindsay quickly gave an answer. Catherine did leave a will, but its contents weren't about asset distribution." Emily looked up. "Then what was it?" Lindsay handed over the scanned copy. The will was short. Catherine wrote to Colonel Williams and also to her father. "The most willful thing I have ever done in my life was to leave the Williams family and marry Kane's father. The thing I regret the least is also marrying him. If Kane is willing to return to the Williams family, please acknowledge him. If he is unwilling, do not force him. He owes nothing to the Williams family, nor to me. He only needs to stand tall and be himself." Emily read to the end, tears falling onto the paper. There were no assets, no conspiracies, only the freedom a mother left for her son. She thought of my mother's sapphire brooch. She had once said, "Your mother left behind a lot of things. I'll buy you a new one later." Now she understood. Some things cannot be bought, nor can they be compensated. Lindsay added, "The Williams family didn't refuse to acknowledge Mr. Kane back then. It was Mr. Kane himself who chose not to return." Emily's voice was hoarse. "Why?" Lindsay looked at him. "After Mr. Kane's mother passed away, he invested most of his time and funds into the foster group. If he had returned to the Colonel's family back then, there would have been no foster group later." The will in Emily's hand slowly slipped away. She suddenly remembered that in those years, I was busy every day, accompanying her to meet clients during the day. modifying the system at night, and going to the hospital in the early morning to handle the formalities after my mother's passing. She thought I just had no career. It turned out I didn't lack a path. I just chose her, but she took that choice for granted. On the day of the divorce mediation, the weather was gloomy. In the court mediation room, Emily and I sat facing each other. Carter sat beside me. Emily didn't bring Henry or anyone else. She looked exhausted. The mediator briefly confirmed the situation. Do both parties agree to the divorce? I said, yes. Emily was silent. The mediator looked at her. Ms. Foster. She clenched her fingers. I do not agree. I wasn't surprised. The mediator asked for the reason. Emily looked at me, her eyes reddening. We still have feelings for each other. I let out a faint smile. The mediator turned to me, and I placed a stack of documents on the table, evidence that the relationship has irretrievably broken down. First, the police report from the celebration banquet. Second, the record of her forcing me to sign a rights waiver agreement in prison. Third, screenshots of her condoning Henry's public insults against me. Fourth, materials on the truth of the car accident and Henry's false claim of being the lifesaver. Fifth, Foster Group's internal responsibility statement. And finally, the handover checklist from when I moved out of the marital home. Every page was cold, so cold that there was no room left for compromise. Emily looked at those documents, her face growing paler by the moment. She whispered, Kane, can you not do this? Do what? Turn us into a pile of evidence. I looked at her. Emily, you were the one who made me realize, those who don't keep evidence only deserve to be wronged. Her tears fell. The mediator was silent for a moment. Ms. Foster, based on the available materials, the conflicts between you two are quite deep. If you insist on disagreeing, the next step may be litigation. Emily looked at me. If I agree, will you really never see me again? I said, yes. She let out a laugh, but her tears didn't stop. Then why should I agree? I wasn't angry, just exhausted, because even if you don't agree, it won't change the outcome. She froze. That sentence was too much like the way she used to talk to me, domineering, decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. So this is what it feels like to be treated that way. The mediation failed. As we walked out of the courthouse, Emily caught up. Kane. I stopped. She stood on the steps below, holding a document. I'll transfer the South City villa and 2 of my commercial properties to you as compensation. I looked at her. I don't want them. Then what do you want? For you to cooperate with the divorce. Her eyes were full of despair. Besides that, nothing. She lowered her head, tears splashing onto the document. I really used to think you would never leave me. I said, I know. She looked up. You know, and that's why I'm leaving. She was completely speechless. That same afternoon, the police announced an update in Henry's case. Henry was suspected of embezzlement, forgery of signatures, and infringement of trade secrets, and had been subjected to compulsory measures in accordance with the law. Sue Jianping confessed. Henry had been planning to get close to Emily for 3 years. The so-called car accident rescue was just him overhearing a nurse call my name in the hospital and seizing the opportunity to claim it. He even kept a recording from back then. In the recording, the nurse asked, where is Mr. Kane Miller? Did he just pay the fee? Henry replied, he had to leave. I'm a friend of Emily's boss. I'll handle the rest. With just that one sentence, he stole 3 years of the truth from me. That evening, Emily locked herself in her office. She listened to the recording over and over, and by the end, she smashed her phone. When old Forster came in, the floor was covered in shards. He looked at his daughter. His voice aged. Emily, it's too late for regrets now, isn't it? Emily leaned back in her chair, her eyes vacant. Dad, have I always been this stupid? Old Forster didn't answer. After a long pause, he said, you're not stupid, you just trust your own judgment of people too much, and you never took Kane seriously enough. That hurt more than any scolding. Emily closed her eyes, and memories flooded back. Me cooking porridge for her in the kitchen at dawn, me taking drinks for her at the financing dinner, me carrying her out covered in blood after the car accident, me asking her through the prison glass, did she take off the brooch? At the time, she thought I was making a big deal out of nothing. Now she realized, that was my last attempt to get an answer from her. She didn't give it, so I left. At the Colonel's old house, Grandpa handed me an old photo. In it, my mother stood young at the Williams' doorstep, holding me in her arms, smiling beautifully. Grandpa said, if your mother saw you like this today, she'd be happy. I looked at the photo. She'd blame me for coming home too late. Grandpa's voice grew hoarse. I was too stubborn back then. I shook my head. The past is the past. Let it go. Grandpa looked at me. What about the Forster family? How do you plan to wrap it up? I put the photo into the album. Divorce, debt collection, withdrawal of authority. Once those 3 things are done, she and I will have nothing to do with each other. Grandpa nodded. Good. I thought this chapter was almost over, but that night, Carter called. Mr. Kane, Henry wants to see you. I said, no. Carter paused. He says he still has a recording about Emily. If you don't meet him, he'll hand it over to the media. I looked out at the night, and after a few seconds, let him. Carter was stunned. You're not worried. What do I have to worry about? I closed the window. That's a consequence Emily has to face, not mine. The next day, Henry's recording indeed leaked, but no one expected that the most damning line in the recording wasn't spoken by Emily, but by Henry himself. Kane won't give up. No problem. I have a way to make sure Emily personally sends him in. On the day the recording leaked, the entire business circle heard Henry's true colors. In the recording, he was talking to Sue Jianping. Sue Jianping asked, "Are you really sure you can get Emily on your side?" Henry laughed, "Absolutely sure. He hates it most when Kane uses his husband status to control her. I just have to play the victim, and she'll think Kane is being petty." Sue Jianping asked again, "What if Kane doesn't make a move?" Henry said, "I'll insult his mother. He won't be able to take it." Sue Jianping was silent for 2 seconds. "You're ruthless enough." Henry's tone was light. "If he makes a move, I'll get the injuries documented. For the sake of her reputation and to prove she's not biased, Emily will definitely call the police. Kane won't give up. No problem. I have a way to make sure Emily personally sends him in." The recording ended there. The internet was in an uproar. Everyone who had spoken up for Henry before fell silent. The official account of Foster Group was flooded with criticism until comments were disabled, and Emily herself was thrust into the spotlight. She personally sent her husband to prison, only to find out he was the one being set up. This female CEO has terrible judgment. Kane is truly pitiful. His savior turned into his abuser. The Foster Group board convened an emergency meeting overnight. Emily was suspended from her position as president, and old Mr. Foster stepped back in. Emily didn't fight it. She just sat in the conference room, listening to everyone criticize her. Some said she was too emotional, others accused her of mismanagement, and a few claimed the Foster Group had nearly been ruined because of her. She accepted it all, because these were the same things Kane had already told her in his own way. She just hadn't listened. 3 days later, the second divorce hearing took place. This time, Emily didn't refuse. She sat in the defendant's seat, wearing a black coat, her face pale. The judge asked for both parties' opinions. I still only said 2 words, divorce. When it was Emily's turn, she stared at me for a long time. Only after the judge reminded her did she whisper, agreed. As those 2 words left her lips, she seemed drained. Regarding the assets, Carter submitted a complete list. The premarital loan of $50 million was legally recognized as a debt, to be repaid by the Foster Group in installments. The authorization for the second-generation cloud warehouse was completely terminated, and any continued use by the Foster Group would be treated as infringement. As for the joint marital property, I only took what the law entitled me to. Emily offered additional compensation, but I refused. She asked to keep the marital home, and I agreed, because I never wanted to go back there. The judge asked if either party had anything to add. Emily suddenly stood up. "I want to say a few words to Kane." The judge looked at me, and I said, "Go ahead." She walked up to me, standing so close that I could see the red veins in her eyes. "Kane, I'm sorry." I nodded. "I heard you." Tears fell from her eyes. "I know it's too late to say anything now, but I still want to tell you. It's not that I didn't love you." I didn't interrupt her. She continued, "I'm just too used to you being right where I left you, used to you cleaning up my messes, used to you never fighting for yourself, used to you putting me first." When Henry showed up, I even felt relieved, because he went along with my emotions. "While you always reminded me where the risks were," she cried quietly, "I treated the person who truly cared about me as someone who ruined the fun." That sentence, she finally got it right. I said, "Emily, it's good that you can see it now." A glimmer of hope lit up in her eyes, but my next words extinguished that light. "But it has nothing to do with me anymore." Her lips trembled. I took the pen from Carter's hand and signed my name on the final settlement. Kane Miller, each stroke clear. Without hesitation, Emily watched my signature like she was watching a door close. She signed too. From that moment on, our 7-year marriage officially ended. As I walked out of the courthouse, a light rain began to fall, much like the day I got out of prison. The difference was, back then, the person waiting for me was my grandfather. Today, the person waiting for me was my own life. Emily chased after me with an umbrella. "Kane, one last hug. Can I?" I stopped and looked at her. She stood in the rain, her eyes full of pleading. 3 years ago, I would have softened. A year ago, maybe still, but not now. I said, "It's not appropriate." The hand holding her umbrella slowly dropped, and the rain soaked her shoulders. I turned and got into the car. Just before the door closed, I heard her shout, "Kane, will you ever think of me?" I didn't answer. The car drove off, and her figure grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. I suddenly remembered a long time ago, the night she succeeded in her first round of funding. She was drunk, leaning on my shoulder, saying, "Kane, don't leave me." I said, "Okay." I kept that promise for years, until she pushed me away with her own hands. As the car passed the intersection, I adjusted the rearview mirror and stopped looking at her. Henry's case quickly entered the review stage. He tried to shift the blame onto Soo-Jae-in, who, in order to reduce his punishment, handed over all the chat records, including how Henry planned to approach Emily, how he falsely claimed credit for the car accident, how he forged signatures for transfers, how he used social media to create ambiguity, and how he deliberately provoked me. The chain of evidence was complete, and Henry could no longer keep up the act. He requested to see Emily while in detention. Emily went, not out of softness, but to hear the last truth with her own ears. Through the glass, Henry looked utterly haggard. The moment he saw Emily, he broke down crying. "Sister Emily, I was wrong. I just love you too much." Emily looked at him, her eyes cold and devoid of warmth. "You don't love me, you love the power I gave you." Henry froze. She continued, "Why did you lie on the day of the car accident?" Henry's eyes darted away. Emily slapped the glass. "Tell the truth." Henry was startled. After a long pause, he said in a low voice, "Because I saw the watch on your wrist. That's the watch of the foster group heir. I knew you were rich." Emily let out a faint smile. "So from the very beginning, you were after the money?" Henry quickly added, "Not later. Later, I genuinely liked you." Emily stood up. "You make me sick." Henry's face turned pale. "Sister Emily, you can't just abandon me. I did it all for you." Emily stopped in her tracks. "Don't mention his name again." She turned back. "You're not worthy." This was the first time he truly stood by my side, but it was too late. After leaving the detention center, Emily went to my mother's grave. She placed the unrepaired sapphire brooch in front of the tombstone and stood there for a long time. She said, "Auntie, I'm sorry." The wind blew through the cemetery, but no one answered her. She finally understood. Some apologies are destined to go unanswered. On the final day of the Williams Family Project review, the foster group lost the bid. Not because I deliberately lowered their score, but because their management risks and technological gaps had already fallen short of the requirements. The winning bid ultimately went to my newly established company, Yenching Technology. The Williams family was the first client, and Hengong was the second. The veteran employees once dismissed by the foster group gradually joined as well. I didn't poach them. I simply gave them a position where they wouldn't have to take the blame for others. At the signing ceremony, the media asked me, "Mr. Kane, how do you view the recent turmoil?" I looked into the camera and said, "People must take responsibility for their choices, whether in marriage or career." The reporter then asked, "So, will you forgive Emily?" I smiled and replied, "I don't hate her." The reporter pressed further, "Does that count as forgiveness?" I said, "No, it just doesn't matter anymore." After the signing ceremony, I received Emily's last email. The subject line read, "Kane, can I give part of the foster group back to you?" Emily's email was lengthy. She said she had resigned as president of the foster group. She mentioned that after old Mr. Foster took over the company again, he decided to sell off some assets to repay debts. She stated that the $50 million premarital loan and subsequent licensing losses would be repaid by the foster group according to the agreement. Finally, she said, "Kane, I know you won't come back, and I know the foster group no longer deserves to be tied to you, but I still want to transfer the 5% of foster group shares under my name to you, not as compensation, not as a reconciliation, but because I want to admit one thing. The foster group's success today was always half yours." I finished reading and closed the email. Carter asked, "Want to reply?" I said, "Decline it for me." He wasn't surprised. Reason, I looked out the window. "I've already taken back what's mine. If she's willing to admit it, it's hers. I don't need her shares to prove myself." Carter nodded. "Got it." I thought that was the end. But the real ending came more quietly than I had imagined. 6 months later, Henry's case was decided. Occupational embezzlement, forgery of signatures, infringement of trade secrets, multiple charges combined. Soo-Jae-in was also sentenced. Henry cried miserably in court, saying he was young and had made a momentary mistake. The judge was not moved. When the verdict was announced, as he was being taken away, he saw me in the gallery. He suddenly struggled and shouted, "Kane, you won. Are you satisfied now?" I stood up and looked at him. "It's not that I won." He froze. I said, "It's that you finally lost." His face twisted instantly, and the bailiffs took him away. I didn't look back. Emily was also there. She sat in the last row, wearing a mask. After the verdict, she walked up to me. 6 months had passed, and she had changed a lot. Short hair, a plain coat, her eyes no longer sharp. "Kane," I nodded. Emily, hearing that name, her eyes still flickered with pain. But she no longer demanded that I address her differently as she used to. She said, "I didn't come today to see you. I just wanted to watch her pay the price. She paused. The foster group is stable now. Not as good as before, but it can still survive. That's fine. She looked at me and suddenly smiled. Still so quiet. I didn't respond. She lowered her voice. I'm planning to leave the city for a while, go to the southern branch and start over from the ground up. This caught me off guard. She used to care most about status, the CEO's office, the boardroom's main seat, everyone looking up to her. Now she's willing to let go, which means she's truly been hurt. I said, good luck. Her eyes reddened slightly. Thank you. We walked out of the courthouse together. The sunlight outside was beautiful. She stopped on the steps. Kane, I used to think you weren't passionate enough, not expressive enough, not understanding enough of my career. Later I realized, what truly supports a person was never about noise. I didn't say anything. She continued, don't worry, I won't bother you anymore. I looked at her. Okay. She smiled bitterly. Not even a polite word. I said, no need. She nodded. No need. She turned and left. This time, she didn't look back, and neither did I. The car was parked by the roadside. Old George stood beside it. He no longer drives for the foster family. After the Williams family project launched, he came to me saying he wanted a change of job. I asked him why. He said, Mr. Kane, I drove for the Fosters for 10 years and saw plenty of human warmth and coldness. I used to think you were too quiet, but now I know. Quiet people aren't without temper, they just don't want to make others uncomfortable. I put him in charge of the executive fleet, and he's done well. Old George opened the car door for me. Mr. Kane, the colonel is waiting for you at the old house for dinner. I got in. What's the occasion, old George smiled. The colonel says today is the day you officially move your household registration back to the Williams family. I paused. 6 months ago, my grandfather asked if I wanted to transfer my household registration back to the Williams family, and I never answered, not because I was unwilling, but because I felt I had long passed the age of needing a family name to prove my identity. Later, I came to understand, going home isn't about borrowing the Williams family's glory, it's to put my mother's mind at ease. When the car drove into the Williams family's old estate, a lantern was hung by the gate. Nothing extravagant, just a warm glow. My grandfather stood under the porch waiting for me, an old wooden table beside him with my mother's photograph on it. In front of the photo lay a restored sapphire brooch, not the one Emily had sent. I hadn't taken that one. My grandfather had found an old craftsman to remake it based on an old photo. He said, your mother's brooch suffered enough grievances, no need to keep it. This new one is for you to remember her by. I picked it up. The gem was bright, like a clear sky after rain. My grandfather handed me a household registration document. Sign it. I took the pen and wrote my name, Kane Miller, grandson of the Williams family, founder of Yentech, and myself. After signing, my grandfather looked at me and suddenly said, do you remember the day you got out of prison? I nodded. Of course I did. That day, the duty officer said, Colonel Williams, as a family member, you are to pick up Kane Miller. Those words later reached Emily's ears and became the beginning of her first collapse. But for me, it wasn't the start of a counterattack. It was the moment I was finally acknowledged. I wasn't anyone's appendage, not Emily's husband, not the shadow behind the foster group, not the waste Henry called me. I was Kane Miller, someone who had a family to take him home. At dinner, my grandfather personally ladled soup for me. He was old, his hands a little shaky. I took the bowl. Let me do it. You sit. I smiled. Grandpa, I'm not a kid anymore. He snorted. You are to me. That simple sentence made my throat tighten. After the meal, I went to the yard alone. There was a text on my phone from an unfamiliar number. Kane, I saw you at the courthouse today. You're doing well, so I'm relieved. I won't bother you anymore. Emily. I took one look, and deleted it. I didn't block her, nor did I reply. No reply is the final answer. The night breeze swept through the yard, and I thought back to 7 years ago, when Emily stood in that shabby office and said to me, Kane, once I succeed, I'll make sure everyone sees you. She never followed through. It didn't matter. I made it happen myself. Yenching Technology went public a year later. On the day of the listing, a bottle of wine was opened at the old Williams house. The media spun my story into something legendary, the long-suffering husband, the role reversal, the illegitimate grandson, the comeback from the brink. Reading it, I felt nothing but detachment. Real life isn't draped in such flowery words. It's just that one day, you finally understand. You can't entrust your dignity to someone else, you can't let your worth be weighed in another's eyes, and you can't let love become an excuse for someone to trample your boundaries again and again. On the day of the bell-ringing ceremony, the venue was packed. Colonel Williams sat in the front row, Lindsay attended on behalf of the partners, and old George stood among the employees in his new suit, grinning like a child. When the bell rang, I raised my hand and struck it. Thunderous applause filled the hall. I didn't think of Emily, nor of Henry. I only thought of that prison door. the one that had locked me in for 12 days, yet also let me walk out of that 7-year marriage for good. After the ceremony, a reporter asked me, "Mr. Kane, who would you most like to thank on your journey?" I looked into the camera and said, "I want to thank myself for never bowing my head in the hardest of times." The crowd fell silent for a moment, then the applause grew even louder. As I stepped down, my grandfather handed me a glass of warm water. "Your mother would be proud." I took it and replied, "I know." Outside, the sunlight was bright. Standing among the crowd, for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I used to think that family status was something granted by others, but later I realized, a person's true family can be blood, it can be loved ones, or it can be the self that rises again. Emily personally sent me to prison, thinking that half a month would wear down my temper, but she didn't know, what I lost there wasn't my temper, but my last shred of hope for her. From then on, I stopped explaining, stopped looking back, and stopped waiting for anyone to prove I was worth it. I myself am the answer.